by contrast, this life was astonishingly boring and never pleasant. Thus, in asking why, it was never to puzzle out why life should be divided in this way, half of it interesting and pleasant, and half of it boring and unpleasant. I had no concept of myself as a captive. It didn't occur to me that anyone was preventing me from having an interesting and pleasant life. When no answer to my question was forthcoming, I began to consider the difference between the two lifestyles. The most fundamental difference was that in Africa I was a member of a family, or a sort of family, that people of your culture have known for thousands of years. If gorillas were capable of such an expression, they would tell you that their family is like a hand, of which they are the fingers. They are fully aware of being a family, but are very little aware of being individuals. Here in the zoo, there were other gorillas, but there was no family. 5 severed fingers do not make a hand. I considered the matter of our feelings. Human children dream of a land where the mountains are ice cream and the trees are gingerbread and the stones are bonbons. For a gorilla, Africa is just such a land. Wherever one turns, there is something wonderful to eat. One never thinks, "Oh, I'd better look for some food." Food is everywhere, and one picks it up almost absent-mindedly, as one takes a breath of air. In fact, one does not think of feeding as a distinct activity at all. Rather, it's like a delicious music that plays in the background of all our activities throughout the day. In fact, feeding became feeding for me only at the zoo, where twice daily great masses of tasteless fodder were pitched in our cages. It was in puzzling out such small matters as these that my interior life began, quite unnoticed. Although naturally I knew nothing of it, the Great Depression was taking its toll on all aspects of American life. Zoos everywhere were being forced to economize, reducing the number of animals to be maintained, and thereby reducing expenses of all kinds. A great many animals were simply put down, I believe, for there was no market in the private sector for animals that were neither easy to keep nor very colorful or dramatic. The exceptions were, of course, the big cats and the primates. To make a long story short, I was sold to the owner of a traveling menagerie with an empty wagon to fill. I was a large and impressive adolescent, and doubtless represented a sensible long-term investment. You might imagine that life in one cage is like life in any cage, but this is not at all the case. Take the matter of human contact, for example. At the zoo, all the gorillas were aware of our human visitors. They were a curiosity for us, worth watching, in the way that birds or squirrels around a house might seem worth watching to a human family. It was clear that these strange creatures were there looking at us, but it never crossed our minds that they had come for that express purpose. At the menagerie, however, I quickly came to a true understanding of this phenomenon. Indeed, my education in this regard began from the moment I was first put on display. A small group of visitors approached my wagon, and after a moment began speaking to me. I was astounded. At the zoo, visitors had talked to one another, never to us. Perhaps these people are confused, I said to myself. Perhaps they've mistaken me for one of themselves. My wonderment and perplexity grew as one after another. Every group that visited my wagon behaved in the same way. I simply didn't know what to make of it. That night, without thinking of it as such, I made my first real attempt to marshal my thoughts to solve a problem. Was it possible, I wondered, that changing my location had somehow changed me? I didn't feel in the least changed, and certainly nothing in my appearance seemed to have changed. Perhaps, I thought, the people who visited me that day belonged to a different species from those who had come to the zoo. This reasoning did not impress me. The two groups were identical in every way but this. That one group talked amongst themselves and the other talked to me. Even the sound of the talking was the same. It had to be something else. The following night I attacked the problem again, reasoning in this way. If nothing has changed with me, and nothing has changed with them, then something else must have changed. I am the same, and they are the same. Therefore, something else is not the same. Looking at the matter this way, I could only see one answer. At the zoo there were many gorillas. Here there was only one. I felt the force of this, but could not imagine why visitors would behave one way in the presence of many gorillas, and different in the presence of one gorilla. The next day I tried to pay more attention to what my visitors were saying. I soon noticed that although every speech was different, there was one sound that occurred over and over, and it seemed to be intended to attract my attention. Of course, I was unable to hazard a guess as to its meaning. I possessed nothing that would serve as a Rosetta Stone. The wagon to the right of mine had occupied a female chimpanzee with an infant, and I had already observed that visitors spoke to her in the same way they spoke to me. Now I noticed that visitors employed a different recurrent sound to attract her attention. At her wagon, visitors called out, "Jaja, Jaja, Jaja." At my wagon, they called out, "Goliath, Goliath, Goliath." By small steps such as these, I soon understood that these sounds, in some mysterious way, attached directly to the two of us as individuals. You, who have had a name from birth, and who probably think that even a pet dog is aware of having a name, which is untrue, cannot imagine what a revolution in perception and the acquisition of a name produced in me. It would be no exaggeration to say that I was truly born in that moment, born as a person. From the realization that I had a name to the realization that everything has a name was not a great leap. You might think a caged animal would have little opportunity to learn the language of its visitors, but this is not so. Menageries attract families, and I soon discovered that parents are incessantly schooling their children in the arts of language. "Look, Johnny, there's a duck. Can you say duck?" "Duck?" "Do you know what a duck says?" "A duck says quack, quack." Within a couple of years, I was able to follow most conversations within earshot, but I found that puzzlement kept pace with comprehension. I knew by now that I was a gorilla and that Jaja was a chimpanzee. I also knew that all the inhabitants of the wagons were animals, but I could not quite make out the constitution of an animal. Our human visitors clearly distinguished between themselves and animals, but I was unable to figure out why. If I understood what made us animals, and I thought I did, I couldn't understand what made them not animals. The nature of our captivity was no longer a mystery, for I had heard it explained to hundreds of children. All the animals of the menagerie had originally lived in something called the wild, which extended all over the world, whatever a world might be. We had been taken from the wild and brought together in one place because, for some strange reason, people found us interesting. We were kept in cages because we were wild and dangerous, terms that baffled me, because they evidently referred to qualities I epitomized in myself. I mean that when parents wanted to show their children a particularly wild and dangerous creature, they would point at me. It's true that they would also point at the big cats, but since I've never seen a big cat outside a cage, this was not enlightening. On the whole, life at the menagerie was an improvement over life at the zoo, because it was not so oppressively boring. It didn't occur to me to be resentful of my keepers, although they had greater range of movement, and they seemed much bound to the menagerie as the rest of us, and I had no inkling that they lived an entirely different sort of life on the outside. It would have been as possible for Boyle's law to have popped in my head as the notion that I had been unjustly deprived of some inborn right, such as the right to live as I pleased. Perhaps 3 or 4 years passed. Then one rainy day, when the lot was deserted, I received a peculiar visitor, a lone man who looked to be ancient and shriveled to me, but who I later learned was only in his early 40s. Even his approach was distinctive. He stood at the entrance of the menagerie, glanced methodically at each wagon in turn, then headed straight for mine. He paused at the rope slung some 5 feet away, planted the tip of his walking stick in the mud just ahead of his shoes, and peered intently into my eyes. I have never been disconcerted by a human gaze, so I placidly returned his stare. I sat, and he stood for several minutes without moving. I remember feeling an unusual admiration for this man, so stoically enduring the drizzle that was streaming down his face and soaking his clothes. At last he straightened up and gave me a nod, as if he'd come to some carefully considered conclusion. "You are not Goliath," he said. At that he turned and marched back the way he'd come, without a look to right or left.